over fields of green, remembering the faces, the moments unseen, the hands that built a dynasty, the vision in their eyes, echoes in the auction barn beneath an endless sky. This is the bullvine, turn the volume high, for the icons of the ages that never will die. From the show ring thunder to the quiet strength they knew, hear their stories now, coming right on through.
Welcome back to the Bullvine Podcast. If you are a regular listener, you know we spend a lot of time on this show looking forward. We talk about the next index release, the latest genomic breakthroughs, the new tech hitting the barn floor.
Right. Always what's next.
Exactly. But today we are hitting the brakes. We are stopping the truck, turning off the engine, and looking in the rearview mirror. Because the story we have today isn't just history. It is, well, it's the blueprint.
It really is.
When I was digging through the source material for this, the architects of the black and white breed, it honestly stopped me in my tracks. It felt incredibly modern, even though the ink on these documents has been dry for 150 years.
It really is something, isn't it? You know, as farmers, we get so caught up in the grind, the 4 a.m. alarms, the broken scrapers, the milk price volatility. It is so easy to forget that we are standing on a foundation that someone else poured. And today's conversation is exactly the kind of thing that reminds you why you put your boots on in the morning. We aren't just milking cows. We are continuing a project that started with some incredibly stubborn, visionary, and slightly crazy people in the 19th century.
Stubborn is definitely the right word. We are digging into the lives of 4 specific visionaries who, between 1852 and 1899, basically imported the engine of the modern dairy industry. And I want to set the expectations right now. This isn't a dry lecture about herd book dates.
No, not at all.
We are talking about blind ambition, literally. We're talking about walking cows through snowstorms. We are talking about financial risks that would make a modern banker faint dead away in his office.
That is the perfect way to frame it. When we look at the Holstein cow today, that black and white dominant force that produces the vast majority of the world's milk, we take her for granted. We assume she was inevitable. Like, of course the dairy industry looks like this. But it wasn't inevitable. It was engineered. It was built by a very small group of people. A blind farmer in upstate New York, a massive Boston merchant who probably weighed more than a heifer, some fruit growers who just wanted cheap fertilizer, and a wealthy reformer.
I want to start with the image that hooked me immediately. This is the hook of the story, and it is honestly cinematic.
Okay.
I want you to picture the scene. It is the 1890s. We're in Lacona, New York, at a place called Brookside Farm. The air is probably thick with dust and the smell of hay. And standing in the middle of the aisle is Henry Stevens.
Henry Stevens, the father of the breed in so many ways. But the thing you have to understand about Henry at this point in his life is that he is operating in the dark.
Right.
He lost his sight in middle age due to an illness. So picture a working dairy barn, the chaos, the animals moving, and here's a man navigating it without sight.
But he isn't just navigating it, he is dominating it. The source material describes a moment where he is examining a cow. He isn't standing back, looking at her top line. He is right there, hands-on. He runs his weathered fingers along her spine. He traces the loin, moves down the rump, feels the pin bones. He is mapping the animal with his fingertips.
And this is where it gets technical and frankly unbelievable. He could tell his sons, Ward, Ralph, and Floyd, who were his eyes in many ways, exactly what that cow looked like.
And you don't just mean her frame.
No, I don't mean just her conformation. I mean her color. He would run his hand over the rib and say, she has a black patch here and a white blaze here.
Hold on. That sounds like mythology. I mean, come on. Can you actually feel the color of hair? Or was he just messing with his sons?
You know, I've thought about this a lot, and it sounds impossible, right? But there are theories. Biologically, is white hair different from black hair?
I have no idea.
Maybe. There is a theory that pigmentation affects the texture or the oiliness of the hair shaft. Or maybe the skin thickness varies slightly between the pigmented and non-pigmented areas because of how they absorb heat.
So there might be a physical difference.
There might be. But whether it was scientifically accurate or not, his sons believed him. That's the key. They trusted his tactile judgment more than their own 20/20 vision. If Henry felt the cow and said, she's the one, they bought her. No questions asked.
That level of trust is wild. But it wasn't just a parlor trick. He wasn't doing this to show off. He was looking or feeling for something specific. What was he hunting for with those hands?
He was feeling for quality. In the 1890s, before we had linear scoring or ultrasound, quality meant the fineness of the hide, the silkiness of the coat, the pliability of the udder texture.
Okay, so it's a whole body feel.
Exactly. A coarse, thick-hided cow was seen as a beef animal, a slow metabolizer. Stevens wanted a cow that felt like a racehorse. Thin skin, visible veins, what we would call dairy character today. He believed that a cow with handling quality would convert feed into milk more efficiently. And he was right.
And his hands picked out the legends.
He assembled what they called the Big Four Foundation cows: De Col II, Netherland Hengerveld, Belle Korndijk, and Helena Burke.
Those names might sound like ancient history to some listeners.
They do, but if you are milking Holsteins in 2026, you are milking Henry Stevens' legacy. De Col II is often called the queen of the breed. Stevens bought her because of what he felt in her structure. He didn't have a genomic proof. He didn't have a sire summary. He had his intuition and his fingertips.
That connects so deeply to the idea of stockmanship. We have so much data now. We have robots that tell us conductivity and rumination minutes, but there is still something irreplaceable about putting your hands on the animal.
That is the big takeaway here. Data is crucial, and we will see later that these guys loved data, but stockmanship is the art that makes the science work.
Right.
Stevens represents that intuitive connection. He knew his cows. He knew their temperament, their appetite, their quirks. You can't get that from a spreadsheet. You have to be in the barn.
So we have the blind visionary, but he didn't start this from scratch. These cows had to come from somewhere. They weren't native to New York or Boston. They were Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
And getting them here wasn't exactly hopping on a Delta flight. Let's go back to the origin story. It involves a ship, some rum, and a very large man named Winthrop Chenery.
Winthrop Chenery, the merchant. This guy was a character. He was based in Boston, and the descriptions of him are just immense. 6'4", over 300 pounds, a giant of a man in the 1850s. He made his money in the trade routes, importing spirits, sugar, commodities.
And in 1852, one of his ships docks in Boston. It's carrying the usual cargo rum, probably.
Yeah.
But the shipmaster has something else on board.
Right. The captain had brought a cow along. Now, for the listeners who don't know maritime history, this was standard practice. There was no refrigeration.
Not at all.
So if you wanted fresh milk for your coffee or your cooking during a 4-week Atlantic crossing, you brought a cow. She lived on the deck, probably in a makeshift pun, bracing herself against the waves.
She must have been incredibly tough to survive a North Atlantic crossing on the deck of a sailing ship.
Tough as nails. And when they docked, she was probably gaunt, tired, and happy to see land. Chenery is walking the pier, checking his cargo. He sees this cow. And he doesn't just see a cow, he sees a machine. He asks the captain, how did she milk?
And the answer must have been shocking.
It was. Even after a sea voyage on terrible feed, she was outproducing the local native cattle that were living in comfortable barns. Chenery was a businessman. He recognized efficiency when he saw it.
Of course.
He bought her on the spot. It wasn't a grand plan to revolutionize agriculture. It was an impulse buy. He essentially bought a used car because the mileage was good.
I love that. It starts with an impulse buy. But then you have the second figure, who is the complete opposite of the merchant. Gerrit Smith Miller, the reformer.
Miller is fascinating because he comes from serious old money. His grandfather, Gerrit Smith, was one of the wealthiest men in New York State, but he was also a radical abolitionist.
A huge figure in that movement.
A giant. The family estate in Peterborough, New York wasn't just a farm, it was a sanctuary. It was a major stop on the Underground Railroad.
We aren't just talking about passive support. I read that John Brown, the John Brown who raided Harper's Ferry, plotted that raid in their living room.
Exactly. So young Gerrit Smith Miller grows up in this intense moral environment. The air he breathed was about reform. It was about fixing the world. You fix slavery, you fix temperance, you fix women's rights. And Miller, being a farm kid at heart, decided he was going to fix agriculture.
So how does a rich kid with a reformer mindset land on Holstein cattle?
He was a student at Harvard. In the evenings, he would go for long walks to clear his head. And Winthrop Chenery's farm in Belmont was nearby. So Miller walks past the pastures in the twilight, and he sees these black and white cattle Chenery's imports.
And he has an epiphany.
He does. He looks at the native cattle, which were mostly scrub cattle, Devons, maybe some poor shorthorns, and he sees inefficiency. They ate a lot and gave very little. Then he looks at the Dutch cattle.
The difference must have been night and day.
Was. And he realized that if he could bring those genetics to American farmers, he could lower the cost of food production. He famously said his mission was to make 2 quarts of milk where there had been 1 before.
That is the definition of efficiency. It's almost a tech startup mentality. I'm going to disrupt the milk supply chain.
It is. It wasn't just about breeding pretty cows for him. It was about feeding a growing nation, a moral cause.
So we have the merchant and the reformer. But my personal favorite group is the third one, Smiths and Powell. Because they weren't dairymen at all. They were fruit growers.
The nurserymen, Wing and Judson Smith and Edward Powell. They were based in Syracuse. They ran a massive commercial nursery, thousands of fruit trees, ornamental shrubs, strawberries. They were huge. But they had a problem.
The soil.
The soil needed food. This is the 1870s. You can't just call up the co-op and order a truckload of synthetic nitrogen. It didn't exist.
Right.
You had guano, which was expensive, or you had manure. They needed massive industrial quantities of manure to keep those trees growing.
So they looked at the Holstein cow and saw a fertilizer's better.
Basically, they saw a large animal with a massive appetite that produced a large volume of waste. That's what they wanted. They bought the cows to feed the trees. The milk was just a byproduct.
That is hilarious. But then something changed.
The accountant Powell started running the numbers. He looked at the ledger and realized, wait a minute. The milk checks from these manure machines are actually making more money than the pears and the apples.
The side hustle beat the main hustle.
Completely. They realized these cows were economic revolutions on 4 legs. So they pivoted. They turned their farm, lakeside, into the Ellis Island of cattle. They stopped worrying about the trees and started importing cows by the hundreds. By 1889, they had 500 head. They were the Amazon distribution center of the Holstein breed.
It's amazing how different their motivations were, but they all ended up in the same place.
Exactly.
However, any good story needs a crisis. And for these guys, the crisis was life or death. We have to talk about the turning point, and specifically the plague.
This is the part of the story where you realize how fragile this whole experiment was. It's 1859. Winthrop Channery has spent 7 years building his herd. He's selecting the best, importing them, breeding them, and then tragedy strikes. Rinderpest.
For the modern listener, that word might just sound like an old history term. But Rinderpest, the cattle plague, is terrifying.
It's the closest thing to a zombie apocalypse for cattle. It's a morbillivirus related to measles. It causes fever, lesions, death. It is highly contagious and nearly 100% fatal in naive herds. When it hit Massachusetts, the state government panicked.
And rightly so.
Right. If it escaped, it could wipe out the entire U.S. livestock industry.
So what did they do?
They didn't quarantine. They didn't vaccinate. There's no vaccine. They ordered total depopulation. The state vets came to Channery's farm, condemned the herd, and killed every single animal.
I want to pause there. Imagine being Channery. You are this proud, successful man. You've poured your passion and your fortune into these animals, and you have to stand there and watch them be destroyed.
The silence in that barn afterwards must have been crushing.
It's the nightmare scenario. Most people, even tough farmers, would have broken. They would have taken the insurance check, if there was any, sold the land, and gone back to the rum trade. Why risk your heart again?
But Channery didn't do that. And this is the measure of the man. The source material says that on the very same day the herd was slaughtered, while the smell of gunpowder and death was probably still in the air, he went to his study and wrote a letter to his agent in Holland.
He ordered more cows.
He ordered replacements immediately. He didn't wait a week to grieve. He didn't hesitate. He knew the vision was right, even if the look was bad. That is resilience on a level I can barely comprehend.
That is incredible. And that resilience saved the breed, because the next importation included the ancestors of almost everything we have today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If he had quit, the Holstein cow in America might have died out right then and there. That one decision changed everything.
Miller, the reformer, faced a different kind of challenge. Not a virus, but the weather. The snowstorm story. This one feels very visceral to anyone who farms in the north.
Oh, yeah. This is classic upstate New York. So Miller convinces his brother Charles to go to West Friesland and buy some stock. Charles buys a bull named Hollander and 3 cows, Crown Princess, Dowager, and Fraulein. They ship them across the ocean, then put them on a train to Canastota, New York.
They arrive on October 19th, 1869. Now, in October, you expect maybe some rain, some chill.
But this is the snow belt. They step off the train into 5 inches of wet, heavy snow. And they aren't at the farm yet. They have to walk from Canastota to Peterborough. That is not a short walk. And they are walking on the old plank road.
Explain the plank road for people who don't know.
Before asphalt, in muddy areas, they would lay down wooden planks to create a road surface. Now imagine wet wood covered in snow and slush.
Oh, that's a nightmare.
It is slick as ice. And you are trying to lead 4 terrified cattle who have just come off a ship and a train up a hill on slippery wood in a snowstorm.
And these cows are valuable. If one slips and breaks a leg, it's a catastrophe.
It was a high-stakes cattle drive. Miller describes the struggle of getting them up the hill, but they made it. And once they got them into the barn, the comparison was stark.
Right.
Miller had 9 native cows in the barn. Those 3 Dutch cows, once they recovered from the trip, produced 2/3 as much milk as the entire group of 9 natives combined.
Wow. That walk in the snow proved the concept. It was a physical demonstration of 2 quarts where there was 1.
It was. The proof was in the pail. Immediately.
Now, eventually, these different threads, the merchant, the reformer, the nurseryman, and the blind farmer, had to intersect. And there was a moment, a specific afternoon in 1876, that feels like a scene from a movie. The buggy moment.
Serendipity is a funny thing. By 1876, Miller's farm in Peterborough is becoming famous. People are hearing about these milk records. So on one autumn afternoon, 2 separate buggies pull into his long driveway at almost the exact same time.
Who was in them?
In one buggy, you have the Smiths, the nurserymen from Syracuse. In the other, you have Henry Stevens, the blind farmer. Though he had some sight left at this point, they didn't know each other. They just happened to arrive at the source of the genetics at the same moment.
The 2 future dynasties of the breed meeting in a driveway? That's incredible.
It's amazing. They both came to look. They both stayed to buy. Stevens bought 2 cows that day, May and Juno. He paid $300 apiece.
Contextualize that, $300. What did that mean in 1876?
Labor on a farm in 1870s might make $1 a day, maybe less. So $300 is a year's wages for 1 cow.
A whole year's salary.
It's like paying $40,000 or $50,000 for a commercial cow today. It was a massive commitment of capital. But that handshake, that meeting, launched the networks that would dominate the breed for the next 50 years.
It sounds like a gentleman's club, but it wasn't always polite. We have to talk about the journey through because it was full of fighting. The feud.
Fox juggles. Put 2 farmers in a room, you get an argument. Put wealthy breeders in a room, you get a war. The feud was between the Visionaries faction, the Boston group, and a man named Thomas E. Whiting.
What were they fighting about? Something big, I assume?
Purity and color. The flashpoint was a bull named Ellsworth. He was a great bull, but he had a black face with a white blaze.
Which looks perfectly normal to us.
To us, yes. But Visionaries and the early purists believed that a true Dutch cow should have a white face or specific markings. They thought the black face indicated mongrel blood, maybe a cross with some other European breed. They were obsessed with purity.
And so they refused to register him.
They locked him out. And Whiting, who owned the bull's genetics, went nuclear. He accused them of being an exclusive club protecting their own investments. So he started his own herd book, the Dutch Friesian herd book versus the Holstein herd book.
So now we have 2 rival organizations registering the same breed of cattle, calling them different names, and writing nasty editorials about each other in the farm papers.
Oh, the editorials were vicious. They called each other frauds, swindlers. The stress was immense. Thomas Whiting actually died at age 50, and people at the time really believed the stress of the herd book war killed him. He worked himself to death trying to prove his cows were legitimate.
But you mentioned something interesting in our prep. This war, as toxic as it was, might have actually helped the breed.
Absolutely. Think about modern media. Controversy sells. The Great Cattle War was front-page news in the agricultural press. Farmers who had never heard of a Holstein cow were now reading about this drama every week.
It was free marketing?
It was huge. It put the black and white cow on the map because everyone wanted to see what all the fuss was about. No such thing as bad publicity.
Right. And eventually they sorted it out.
Exactly. Cooler heads prevailed. They realized that fighting was bad for business. In 1885, they merged the 2 associations to form the Holstein Friesian Association of America. That's why the name is hyphenated. It was a peace treaty.
While the men were fighting, the cows were working. We need to talk about the records. Legitimacy isn't just about herd books. It's about what hits the pail.
Miller understood this better than anyone. He put his cow dowager on test. In 1871, she completed the first official annual milk record in the United States, 12,681 pounds in 365 days.
Again, for the modern ear, 12,000 pounds sounds like a cull cow.
Right, but the average cow in 1871 was giving maybe 4,000 pounds, if you were lucky. Dowager was a super cow. She proved that these animals had persistence. They didn't just milk hard for 3 months and dry off. They milked all year.
And then Smiths and Powell pushed it even further with Clotilde.
Clotilde was a monster. In 1885, she made 26,021 pounds. That is a respectable record today for a low-input herd. In 1885, it was science fiction. People didn't believe it was biologically possible.
Before we get to the big showdown, I want to touch on the human side again. Amidst the feuds and the records, there's a story about names. The Nanny Smith story. It's a small detail, but it shows the heart behind the business.
I love this story. So Gerrit Smith Miller is in Holland, walking the polders, looking for cows. He's with his brother. A Dutch farmer waves them down. The farmer's name is Gerrit Smit, S-M-I-T.
So you have Gerrit Smith Miller meeting Gerrit Smith.
Two Gerrits, and they start talking probably through a translator or broken English Dutch, and they realize they have more in common. The Dutch farmer asks about Miller's family. Miller mentions his grandmother and sister are named Anne. The Dutch farmer's face lights up. He says, "My little daughter is named Annetje."
That shared connection across the ocean.
It broke down the barrier. The Dutch farmer decided to sell Miller a heifer he was planning to keep for himself. And when Miller asked what to name her in the American herd book, the farmer said, "Name her after my daughter." So she was registered as Nanny Smith.
That's wonderful.
It just reminds you that this trade wasn't just cold commerce. It was people connecting with people over a shared love of the animal.
I love that. Okay, let's move to the main event. The breakthrough. If this were a sports movie, this is the championship game. Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
1887.
The dairy show of 1887. This was the moment the Holstein had to prove she wasn't just a water cow.
Explain the water cow insult. What did that mean?
The criticism from the Jersey and Guernsey breeders was that Holsteins gave a lot of milk, but it was blue, thin, and had no fat. They called it skim milk on tap. At the time, butterfat was where the money was. The Jersey was the undisputed queen.
And the Jersey breeders were arrogant about it.
Unbelievably arrogant. The president of the American Jersey Cattle Club, Frederick Bronson, was so sure his cows would win the butter test at the show that he commissioned a silver trophy worth $500. And he had a Jersey cow engraved on it before the competition started.
That is just asking for bad karma.
It is the ultimate jinx. So the test begins. Now, the butter test back then wasn't a lab test. They literally took the milk from each cow, skimmed the cream, churned it into butter right there at the show, and weighed the butter. It was a 24-hour churn test.
So it's manual, it's messy, and it's public.
And the Holsteins, led by Smith's and Powell's cow Clotilde, crushed it. They produced more butter than the Jerseys. Not just more milk, more actual butter.
The silence from the Jersey camp must have been deafening.
The Holstein breeders went wild. They had beaten the establishment at their own game. It proved that the Holstein was a dual-purpose dairy cow volume and D-solids. That victory at Madison Square Garden really signaled the changing of the guard. The Jersey reign was ending. The Holstein era was beginning.
And right around this time, our blind friend Henry Stevens makes the gamble of his life.
He does. The year is 1891. Stevens is fully blind now, but he hears about a dispersal sale. He goes in and pays $6,000 for 6 head of cattle.
That is an astronomical amount of money for that time.
It was everything he had and more. But in that group was Deckhole second. He had felt her. He knew she was the future. And that gamble paid off in a way that changed history. In 1912, a cow from his breeding program, Pontiac Clotilde de Cole Teckentepel, became the first cow of any breed to produce 1,000 pounds of butterfat in a year.
The blind man saw the furthest.
He really did. He bred the first 1,000-pound fat cow by touch. It's just an unbelievable achievement.
But as with all things, time marches on. The ripple effect brings us to the end of these men's lives. And sadly, it wasn't a happy ending for all of them.
No. The era ended in fire and decline. Fire was the scourge of the time. The Stevens barns at Maplewood burned. The Smiths and Powell empire collapsed when the car replaced the horse. Remember, they bred carriage horses too, and that market evaporated overnight.
In Miller.
The reformer.
Miller held on the longest. He became the grand old man of the breed. But in 1936, tragedy struck. The Peterborough Mansion House, the home where the abolitionists met, where the history happened, caught fire. It burned to the ground.
Oh, no.
Miller was 91 years old. Watching his ancestral home burn broke his spirit. He died a year later and his herd was dispersed.
It's a sad end to the men. But the genetics are immortal.
That is the beautiful part. The men are gone, but the cows are still here. The legacy lives on in every barn.
Let's look at the numbers. 16 generations later, what does that actually mean? If you pull up the pedigree of a modern legend, let's say Glenridge Citation Roxy, the queen of the breed, if you trace her maternal line back, generation by generation, you go back 16 steps and you land squarely on cows imported by Miller and Stevens. You land on Otile and Ruka.
It's a direct line.
A direct, unbroken line. And there is a specific stat about Decolsecond, the cow Stevens bought.
What's that?
Researchers analyzed the pedigree of the entire North American Holstein population. They found that Decol genetics contribute to something like 7% of the genes in the entire modern herd.
7% from one cow.
She is everywhere. Every time you milk a Holstein, you are milking a little bit of Decolsecond.
That leads us to the farmer translator moment.
Yeah.
Because this isn't just cool history. It has implications for us today, specifically regarding inbreeding.
Right. We talk about the foundation, but foundation implies a narrowing, a bottleneck. All of our modern cattle come from this very small group of animals that survived the rinderpest, the snowstorms, and the impulse buys.
So when farmers see inbreeding coefficients creeping up, 8%, 10%, it's not just because they used a popular bull last year.
It's baked into the cake. We are recycling the same genetics that Miller and Stevens selected 150 years ago. This is why outcross genetics are so hard to find. There are no new lines. We are just shuffling the deck that these four men handed us.
It also explains why our genomic reliability is so high.
Exactly. The reason we can predict a bull's performance with 80% accuracy is because the gene pool is consistent. We are statistically relying on the lack of variation. We are mining the gold that they buried in the ground.
That is a profound way to look at it. We are the stewards of their selection decisions.
We are. If Chenery had bought a different cow off that rum ship, or if Stevens had preferred thick-hided cows, our industry would look completely different today.
The cow effect, like the butterfly effect.
Exactly, the cow effect. I like that.
All right, let's wrap this up. We have a listener on a tractor right now, maybe chopping corn, maybe scraping the barn. What are the takeaways? What's the one thing they should sit with?
I think there are 4 things. First, measure what matters. Miller invented the system that became DHIA. He weighed the milk. If you don't track it, you can't improve it. That is the golden rule of dairy.
Amen to that.
Second, intuition plus data. Be like Henry Stevens. We love genomics, but don't become a paper breeder. Put your hands on the cow. Look at her. The magic happens when you combine the data with the art of stockmanship.
Balance is key.
Third, resilience. This is the big one. Chenery's herd died, and he ordered more the same day. Muller walked cows through a blizzard. Farming is hard. It has always been hard. But the industry is built on stubborn optimism. If you are having a bad day, remember Chenery standing in that empty barn and refusing to quit.
That's a powerful thought. And the last one.
Build families. These men didn't chase freaks or one-hit wonders. They built maternal lines, the big 4. They stacked generations of quality. That is how you build a herd that lasts. Focus on consistent cow families.
Consistent cow families. That never goes out of style.
Never.
There is a physical reminder of this story, isn't there? A place people can see.
There is. If you ever find yourself near Peterborough, New York, drive down Oxbow Road. There's a bronze plaque on a boulder. It's called the Plymouth Rock of the Holstein breed. It marks the pasture where Miller's first cows grazed. It's sacred ground for us.
I think we need to plan a bovine road trip.
I'll drive.
That's another story from the Bovine Podcast. These are the people who built the future of dairy by looking at the past.
And next time you look at a black and white cow, just take a second. Remember the blind man who felt her potential before anyone else saw it?
Find more stories at www.thebulvine.com. Subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Stay safe out there.
This is the bovine. Turn the volume high for the icons of the ages that never will die. From the show ring thunder to the quiet strength they knew. Hear their stories now, coming right on.